Okay, so I'm going to add on one more conceptual piece because I know this is a bit conceptual right now, and then we're going to actually go into the practices that let us sense the alchemy of the mud, how it really can make us flower. And I'm reading a book right now, and it's called Anti-Fragile. And the author is Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And I'm curious, how many of you are reading Anti-Fragile or have read it? I see one hand, two hands. Maybe I can't see up there. It's a really, it's brilliant and interesting and very much related to what we're talking about. So anti-fragile is in contrast to fragile. And fragile, the kind of definition of fragile is anything that when it encounters stress can be destroyed. Okay, so it's whenever there's change or chaos or unpredictability, something that's fragile breaks, shatters, gets destroyed. So if you're a fragile person, your makeup's fragile, when stress arises, you'll contract and replay the old patterns of reacting and fail to adapt. Okay? So it's rigidity and flexibility in the face of change. That's fragile. Anti-fragile, and it could be a person or a system or an economy or nature itself. Anti-fragile, if you're anti-fragile, you benefit from stress. You actually benefit from randomness, from change, from chaos, from tension. It's like, the Hydran mythology that whenever there was a head slashed off, just grew more heads. Or some of you remember the Borg from Star Trek? Yeah? Okay, so what happened with the Borg, anything that would come their way, they would, out of interest, assimilate and take all the qualities. That was their response, was to assimilate anything unique. They're real adaptable. So an anti-fragile person responds to stress by listening to the message. Remember, all of our stress is information. By listening to the message, by calling on dormant inner resources and becoming stronger, more flexible. Anti-fragile is not just resilience, which means bouncing back. It means actually changing and transforming and evolving, mud to lotus. And so it fits with a lot of folk wisdom. This is not news. I mean, most of us have heard the different phrases of, difficulty builds character, or necessity is the mother of invention, that kind of thing. Bless you. So today I had an experience that brought up this whole question of anti-fragile, and the experience was that one of my regular rhythms in terms of my day is that somewhere around 3 or 4, I take a nap, and I take about a 25-minute nap. If I get that nap, I have an evening ahead. If I don't, I get tighter and tighter till I have that burning sensation and that achy feeling that you can have when you're really, really tired, and it's hard to just hold one person in my vision, they become 4 and that kind of thing. So I didn't get my nap today. And I know, poor you. So I didn't get my nap, and so that was like this random chance variable and life out of control. And so the question for anti-fragile is there a way so the stress that played through me was a feeling not only of a sleepiness, but anxiety, because there's a sense of, oh my gosh, if I'm really tired, I won't really, connect with authenticity. And I knew and tonight's talk is it's not a talk I've given before, and I knew it had enough concept that I had to make it juicy, because otherwise I'd lose everybody. I don't know how it's going so far. So part of me goes, okay, but this is about, anti-fragile, what does that mean? And it didn't mean that I would adapt to the sleepiness and in some way overcompensate and get charged up. What I could sense anti-fragile would mean, what would make mud into lotus, was that there would be it would in some way be a message not to have such a sense of self that needs to perform and that can either fail or succeed. Just let it be okay, because it's not so much about that. And just even remembering that as an idea woke up that as a possibility. Do you know what I mean? more on that. Final point about the value of stress is that it's even seen in the most extreme life situations that traumatic, post-traumatic growth syndrome is a whole new field of study whereby researchers have found in every culture that they've researched, and I'll list some: post-traumatic growth in Israelis who survived terrorist attacks, and in Palestinians who were held in Israeli prisons, and Turkish earthquake survivors, and Germans who survived the Dresden bombing. And one research describes growth in spouses of cancer survivors. But beyond that, you can look in your own lives and people you know. Trauma, and this doesn't always happen, sometimes it turns into PTSD that is absolutely a huge anguish. But there's also a huge amount reported of how trauma then has a kind of a reckoning with a life and a new sense of what's meaningful, a deepening of relationships, really calling on compassion, and so on. Let's just take a moment. I'd like to invite you to reflect. And just as a way to enter the moment, just to pause and feel your breath. And just invite yourself right here. And let come to mind a time in your life when it felt like things were falling apart, where the ground really got shaken for you. And ideally one in the past, so you have a little bit of a vantage point. If you're going through one right now, you can certainly ask these questions, but you won't have quite the perspective since you're in the midst. But sometime it might be a death of a loved one, or divorce, job loss, serious illness. Maybe it was a trauma of an accident or being in a war zone. And just with some curiosity, sense that is one of the inevitable expressions of impermanence, of loss, of change. And then just to reflect for a moment, did it change you? How might that have changed you? Do you feel that in some way it brought you to contacting a deeper resourcefulness or wisdom, understanding? Stress, the pain of loss, it's a message in our system. Is there anything you can find out about yourself and how it might have changed you? You can continue to reflect on that, and I'll keep speaking for a bit. I was talking to my mom earlier in the week, and I asked her about that. I said, what would you say is a time when, things were really falling apart for you? And for her, it was her struggle with alcoholism. She spent a number of years, probably about 8 years, where it was really intense, and then has not drinking alcohol since then, and that became her life, actually. She became the executive director of the National Council of Alcoholism in her part of New Jersey, and that became her life path. But she named alcoholism the struggle, and I asked her how it changed her. And for her, she said, I just, it was humbling, but my empathy just grew for others, and my intimacy. She said that through 12-step program, she just became really intimate with people who were being real with their woundedness. And also she said the valuing of life moments, because she could see how much of her life had been swept away by addiction, that she wasn't there for it. So it's a valuing of life moments and wanting to help. So those are ways that it changed her. And this has happened as part of this process of accompanying her as she's dying. I've found that I periodically will ask the weightier questions, And during one round of doing it, one of my sisters accused me of having my net out for stuff for Dharma talks. Before I could even defend myself, I was going to, but I wouldn't have been right. My mother jumped in. She goes, "Oh no, I'm no font." She said, this is what she said: "All I want is to be roaming like a wild horse, winds blowing my mane." And I thought to myself, well, dying is its own stress. It's a big one. And it's the mud to lotus. It can also make our spirit very transparent. It's like she's very sensing the freedom that's past this particular part of existence being in a body. So no mud, no lotus. We have the capacity to evolve through the earthy stressors. And our spiritual path is not because they're gone, it's through them that we wake up. They're the grist. And we look around and we look at ourselves, and if we're honest, we see how every day we get caught in stressful times, and we're not in that alchemy of spiritually waking up through it. We're really caught in our normal, neurotic, ordinary, stressful reactivity, right? Yeah? Okay. So I think the important inquiry is what enables us to be more anti-fragile, so that we're actually aligned in a way that as stress comes up in our system, in whatever form, anger, hurt, fear, anxiety, that's a message, that we have the presence to respond in a way that it's part of waking up. It's not just repeating patterns. So that's the inquiry. And I'll bring in at this point Albert Einstein's very famous quote from him. It says, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." So if the problem or the stress is coming from an egoic self that's living inside a story of who we are and who the world is, we can't wake up from that stress or wake up through that stress with more stories and more thoughts. Okay? It has to, in other words, we have to draw on some deeper quality of presence than the thinking mind in order to wake up out of the stress of the egoic self. And the way that happens, this is the alchemy of awakening, are through intention and attention. This is the last part of this talk, is going to be how through our intention and our attention we can really experience that mud blossoming lotus being of what we are.